Get out. Elijah Blackwood's voice sliced through the room, cold and razor-sharp. You're fired. I froze in the doorway of the massive penthouse living room, my hand still clutching the handle of 7-year-old Sophie's bright pink roller suitcase. We'd just returned from our weekend science camp, and I had no idea what storm we'd walked into. Sophie looked up at me with wide, confused eyes. Miss Clara, what's happening? Before I could answer, Elijah's imposing figure moved closer, his tailored suit doing nothing to hide the tension coiled in his shoulders. His jawline could cut glass when he was angry like this. Sophie, sweetheart, go to your room. Clara and I need to talk. Despite his fury, his voice softened for his daughter. Sophie hesitated, looking between us with the perceptiveness that children often possess, but adults rarely give them credit for. But Dad. Now, Sophie. With reluctance, she took her suitcase and disappeared down the hallway, throwing one last worried glance over her shoulder. The moment we were alone, Elijah's facade cracked further. He thrust his phone in my face, displaying a glossy photo on the screen. Explain this. My stomach dropped as I recognized the image, me, sitting across from Austin at an upscale restaurant 2 nights ago, his hand covering mine on the table as we laughed about something I couldn't even remember now. That's not what it looks like, I managed, hating how cliché the words sounded even as they left my mouth. Really? Elijah's eyebrow arched dangerously. Because it looks like you're on a date with Austin Walker, who happens to be my main business competitor and the man who's been trying to sabotage my company for the past 3 years. I shook my head, trying to process this information. I didn't know who he was in relation to you. We met at the coffee shop near Sophie's school. And you expect me to believe that's a coincidence? His laugh was devoid of humor. 6 months you've been in my home, caring for my daughter, with access to my schedule, my business papers, my life, and suddenly you're dating Austin Walker? The accusation burned. I've been Sophie's nanny for 6 months, yes. And in those 6 months, you've barely spoken more than 10 sentences to me each day. How would I know about your business rivals? Something flickered across his face. Doubt, perhaps. Or maybe just surprise that I'd stand my ground. I trusted you with my daughter, he said, voice lower now but no less intense. Do you have any idea what that means to me? Sophie is everything. I know that. And I did. I'd seen it in every careful decision he made for her, every boundary he set, every late night he spent working to secure her future. Which is why I would never do anything to hurt her or betray that trust. Elijah ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its perfect style. For the first time, I noticed the shadows under his eyes, the slight dishevelment of his normally impeccable appearance. It doesn't matter, he finally said. I can't risk it. Pack your things. I felt as though I'd been slapped. 6 months of building a relationship with Sophie, of coming to care for the bright, imaginative child with all my heart, gone, just like that. You can't just. I can, and I am. He turned away, staring out at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'll have HR send your final payment and references. He didn't answer. In the silence that followed, I heard a small sniffle from the hallway. We both turned to see Sophie standing there, tears streaming down her face. You're making Miss Clara leave? Her voice was tiny, wounded. Elijah's expression softened instantly. Sophie, I told you to go to your room. I don't want her to go. Sophie ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Please, Dad, don't make her go. She's the only one who listens to me about the stars and helps with my science projects and doesn't treat me like I'm a baby. I placed a protective hand on her shoulder, my heart breaking. In the 6 months I'd worked for the Blackwoods, I'd grown to love this child as if she were my own. Sophie, with her brilliant mind and old soul, had carved out a place in my heart I hadn't known existed. Looking at Elijah over Sophie's head, I saw conflict raging behind his steel blue eyes. His gaze moved from his daughter to me, then back again. 1 week, he finally said, the words seeming to cost him. You have 1 week to convince me you're not working with Walker. Until then, you can stay. Yay! Sophie squeezed me tighter, oblivious to the tension. "Miss Clara's staying." "Sophie, honey," I said gently, "why don't you go unpack your science camp things? I need to talk to your dad for a minute." She looked between us, hesitant but curious. "Promise you won't leave?" "For now," I nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. Once Sophie had bounded down the hallway, I turned to face Elijah. The space between us seemed to shrink as he stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker blue in his steel-colored eyes. For the first time, I noticed how his presence affected me physically, my heartbeat quickening, skin warming under his intense gaze. "You've always been good with her," he said, his voice lower now. "It's part of why I hired you, but it's also why this hurts so much." "I would never hurt Sophie," I insisted, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Or you." Something shifted in his expression. His eyes dropped briefly to my lips before returning to meet mine. The air between us felt charged, electric. "6 months," he said quietly. 6 months of watching you with my daughter. 6 months of trying to maintain a professional distance when everything about you." He stopped himself, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. I swallowed hard, surprised by his near confession. So I hadn't been imagining the lingering glances, the way he sometimes found excuses to be in the same room, the slight softening of his voice when we spoke late at night after Sophie was asleep. "Everything about me, what?" I challenged, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer still, now just inches away. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly him. My back pressed against the wall as he placed one hand beside my head, not trapping me but definitely claiming the space around me. "Everything about you draws me in," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Your intelligence, your patience with Sophie, the way you stand up to me when everyone else just nods and agrees. And now I find out you might be connected to the one man who's been trying to destroy everything I've built." My breath caught in my throat. "There's nothing between Austin and me. It was just dinner." "1 week, as I said," he said, his free hand reached up, fingers lightly brushing my cheek in a touch so gentle it contradicted the intensity of his gaze. "You have 1 week to convince me you're not working with Walker." I should have been focusing on clearing my name, but all I could think about was the warmth of his fingers against my skin and how rapidly my heart was beating. "And the conditions? Or can I stay here just like this?" I managed to ask. "No." "During that time, you don't leave this apartment without my knowledge. You don't contact anyone outside without my approval, and you certainly don't see Walker again." My jaw dropped. That's imprisonment." "That's protection," he countered, his face now close enough that I could feel his breath on my lips. "For my daughter and my company. And maybe even for you." His protectiveness should have angered me, but something in his expression, vulnerability beneath the power, made my irritation fade. There was history here I didn't understand, wounds inflicted by Walker that went beyond business. 1 week, Clara. And during that time you're mine." The possessiveness in his voice sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Not fear, exactly, but something equally powerful, desire mingled with defiance. "I'm not property, Mr. Blackwood," I said, though my voice had lost some of its conviction. His eyes narrowed slightly, tracking my reaction. "No. But while you're under my roof, under suspicion, you answer to me alone. As I said, you're mine now, and I don't share." I should have been outraged. I should have walked out the door with my dignity intact. But something in his gaze, something beyond the accusation and anger, made me pause. The attraction between us, carefully ignored for months, suddenly seemed impossible to deny. He stepped back slightly, giving me space, but the tension remained, a tangible thing connecting us across the inches he'd put between us. 1 week, I agreed, wondering what I was getting myself into. The first 3 days of my probation were excruciating. Elijah worked from home, something Sophie told me he rarely did, and his presence filled the penthouse like a gathering storm. He watched me constantly, appearing in doorways when I was helping Sophie with homework or hovering nearby when I prepared meals. By the 4th day, something shifted. I caught him looking at me differently when he thought I wouldn't notice, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, maybe even admiration. "You're good with her," he said that evening, as I tucked an exhausted Sophie into bed after an intense day of home science experiments. I jumped slightly, not having heard him approach. "She makes it easy. She's an incredible child." A soft smile transformed his face, the first real one I'd seen. "She is too smart for her own good sometimes. Like her father, I imagine." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged with something new. My intelligence was learned through necessity. Hers is natural brilliance. "You don't give yourself enough credit," I said before I could stop myself. He tilted his head, studying me. "And you're remarkably unafraid for someone who could still be fired and potentially face legal charges. Because I know I've done nothing wrong." I closed Sophie's door gently. "And deep down, I think you're starting to believe that too." He didn't confirm or deny my assertion, instead changing the subject. "Come to my office. There's something I want to show you." Curious, I followed him down the hallway to the room that had been strictly off-limits to me since I'd started working there. His home office was exactly what I would have expected, minimalist, organized, with a massive desk facing the same spectacular view as the living room. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk while he retrieved something from a drawer. "Do you know what this is?" He placed a folder on the desk between us. "I'm guessing it's not a bonus check," I said dryly. The corner of his mouth twitched. "It's your background check. The one I ran before hiring you. Standard procedure for anyone working closely with Sophie." I nodded, unsurprised. Single father, billionaire, protective, of course he'd run a background check. "But this," he continued, placing another, thicker folder beside the first, "is the one I ran 3 days ago." That did surprise me. "You investigated me again?" "More thoroughly this time." His expression was unreadable. Clara Bennett, 28, graduated from Columbia with a degree in early childhood education and a minor in astrophysics, an unusual combination. Previously worked as a teacher at Westwood Academy until the school lost funding last year. No criminal record, excellent credit score, no suspicious financial transactions. I swallowed hard. I could have told you all that without the invasion of privacy. "Would you have also told me about your sister?" My heart skipped a beat. "What about her?" "That she's currently undergoing experimental treatment for a rare form of leukemia. Treatment that costs approximately $60,000 per month." The air seemed to vanish from the room. That's private. Not when Austin Walker is on the board of directors for the medical research company providing that treatment. I closed my eyes, the pieces falling into place. This was what he'd been looking for, my motive for supposedly spying on him. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't know he was connected to Emma's treatment or to you. We literally just met for coffee twice, and then dinner once. He seemed nice. Normal." When I opened my eyes, Elijah was watching me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. "I believe you," he said quietly. 3 simple words, but they washed over me with unexpected relief. "You do?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "Walker isn't subtle. If he were using you, he would have made his move by now, asked questions about my work, my schedule, my deals." "Has he?" I shook my head. "We mostly talked about books and films. He mentioned he was in finance, nothing specific." Elijah's jaw tightened. Classic Walker. Playing the humble businessman while setting up his chess pieces. "I'm not a chess piece," I said firmly. "No," he agreed, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're much more valuable than that." The statement hung between us, layered with meanings I wasn't sure either of us was ready to explore. Before he could answer, a small voice called out from down the hallway. "Dad? Miss Clara? Are you still up?" We both turned to see Sophie standing in the doorway of Elijah's office, rubbing her eyes sleepily, her favorite stuffed astronaut tucked under one arm. "Sophie." Elijah's voice immediately softened. "I thought you were asleep. Did we wake you?" "I had a bad dream," she mumbled, then brightened suddenly. "But now you're both here. Can I show you something?" I was saving it for tomorrow, but since we're all awake. I exchanged a glance with Elijah, the tension between us momentarily set aside. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, moving toward her. "What is it?" "My solar system model. I finished it while you were talking." She grabbed both our hands, pulling us eagerly toward her bedroom. When we entered Sophie's room, the ceiling lights were off, replaced by the gentle glow of the detailed solar system mobile she'd been working on for days. Tiny planets hung suspended from invisible threads, with a battery-powered light as the sun at the center. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely impressed by her craftsmanship. "So, this is what you were doing instead of sleeping?" Sophie gave me a sheepish grin. I was too excited to finish it. I only needed to add the rings to Saturn. Elijah moved to stand beside me, his shoulder just brushing mine. "Remarkable work, Sophie. You've even got the planets to scale." Sophie beamed with pride. "Miss Clara helped me calculate the proportions." She bounced on her bed. "Can we have a star party? Please?" "A star party?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You know," Sophie rolled her eyes dramatically, "where we lie on the floor and look at the stars and tell stories. Like Miss Clara and I do sometimes." I felt Elijah's questioning gaze on me. "Sometimes when she can't sleep, we make a blanket nest on the floor and look at her glow-in-the-dark stars," I explained. "It's our little tradition." Something soft passed over his features. "I'd like to join this tradition if I'm welcome." Sophie squealed with delight, diving off her bed to arrange blankets and pillows on the floor. "Dad never does fun stuff like this. He's always working." "I'm trying to do better," Elijah said quietly, just for me to hear. Minutes later, the three of us lay side by side on Sophie's bedroom floor, staring up at both her handmade solar system and the constellation of glow stars on her ceiling. Sophie nestled between us, pointing out the constellations I taught her. "And that's Cassiopeia, the queen," she explained to her father. "Miss Clara says she was very beautiful, but also very proud." "Miss Clara knows a lot about stars," Elijah commented, his voice warm in the darkness. "She knows everything," Sophie declared with absolute certainty. "That's why she should stay forever." I felt my cheeks warm, grateful for the dimness of the room. "Forever is a long time," Elijah murmured, but there was something in his voice that made my heart skip. Sophie rolled onto her stomach, looking between us with sudden seriousness. "You know what would be the best thing ever? If Miss Clara wasn't just my nanny anymore." Elijah tensed beside her. "Sophie, if she was my mommy instead," Sophie finished, her voice small but determined. The silence that followed felt electric. I didn't dare look at Elijah. "Sweetheart, I finally managed, my voice gentle. Family relationships are complicated. They take time to, but we already feel like a family," Sophie insisted. "Especially now." She reached out, placing one small hand in mine and the other in her father's. "See? Perfect fit." To my surprise, Elijah didn't immediately shut down the conversation. Instead, he squeezed his daughter's hand while his eyes found mine over her head. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "You might be onto something, Soph," he said softly, his eyes never leaving mine. The moment stretched between us, full of possibility, until Sophie broke it with a giggle and launched a surprise tickle attack on her father. Elijah's deep laugh filled the room as he retaliated gently. "Help me, Miss Clara," Sophie shrieked in delight. 2 against 1. Without thinking, I joined the playful fray. Somehow, in the midst of laughter and tangled limbs, I found myself pulled against Elijah's chest, his arm wrapped around my waist while Sophie collapsed in giggles beside us. Time seemed to stop as we looked at each other, faces inches apart, the pretense of professional distance completely forgotten. His eyes dropped to my lips, and for a moment, I thought he might close the distance between us. "You're like real parents," Sophie whispered, curling against both of us, oblivious to the tension. "Mom and Dad." The word "mom" hung in the air, unexpected and powerful. I saw something flash in Elijah's eyes, longing, perhaps, or some deeper emotion I couldn't name. "Time for bed, Munchkin," he said, his voice slightly rough as he reluctantly released me. "It's getting late." After tucking Sophie in, we left her room together, the silence between us charged with unspoken words. In the hallway, Elijah turned to me, his expression serious. I should apologize for Sophie. She can be forward. She's honest, I corrected. It's one of the things I love about her. The word love lingered between us. Clara, he began, stepping closer. What happened in there? My phone rang shrilly, shattering the moment. I pulled it from my pocket automatically, then froze when I saw the caller ID. Austin Walker. Elijah's eyes darkened as he recognized the name on my screen. Are you going to answer that? Maybe you should, he said, his voice suddenly cool. It might be about your sister's treatment. The reminder of Emma's condition felt like a bucket of cold water. Elijah, it's not what you think. Isn't it? The warmth from earlier had vanished completely. Walker has impeccable timing, I'll give him that. I haven't spoken to him since before you confronted me, I insisted. I have no idea why he's calling now. My phone continued to ring between us, like a physical manifestation of the wedge driving us apart. I looked at Elijah, then down at the still-ringing phone, and made my decision. I answered the call, putting it on speaker. Clara, it's Austin, came the smooth voice. I've been thinking about our dinner. I'd like to see you again, perhaps tomorrow? I have some news about potential new treatment options for your sister. Elijah's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving mine as I responded. Austin, I'm sorry, but I won't be seeing you again, I said firmly. Whatever information you have about Emma's treatment, you can send through official channels to her doctor. Our personal connection ends here. There was a pause on the line. I see. Is Blackwood there with you? Is that what this is about? This is about me making my own choices, I replied, my voice steady. Goodbye, Austin. I ended the call and turned off my phone completely before slipping it back into my pocket. The silence that followed felt weighted with significance. You didn't have to do that, Elijah said quietly, though I could see relief in his eyes. Yes, I did. Emma's treatment is important, but I won't be manipulated. And I need you to trust me. So, am I still your prisoner? I asked, trying to lighten the suddenly heavy atmosphere. You were never my prisoner, he corrected, his eyes softening. But I would still prefer it if you didn't see Walker again. Because he's your business rival? Elijah stepped forward until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. Because I don't share what's mine, he said, voice low and possessive. My breath caught. I'm not yours, Mr. Blackwood. Aren't you? His voice was low, almost hypnotic. You live in my home. You care for my daughter. You've become essential to both of us in just 6 months. And just now, with Sophie, I saw the way you looked at us, at me. I stood too, unwilling to let him tower over me for this conversation. If I am not wrong, that makes me nothing more than an employee. Is that all you want to be? An employee? The question was genuinely curious, not challenging. We stood in silence for a moment, the air between us charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. His eyes searched mine, looking for an answer I wasn't sure I was ready to give. Elijah, Before I could finish, his phone rang. The spell broken, he stepped back and answered it, his expression immediately shifting to one of concern. When he demanded of the caller, how extensive? Send me the details. I'll meet you at the office in 20. He hung up and turned to me, any personal revelation forgotten. I have to go. There's been a security breach at the company. Our security team just detected it. At this hour? I asked, concerned. That's when they strike, when they think no one's watching. His expression darkened. And right after you turn down Walker's call, it might be nothing, but the timing feels suspicious. You think he's involved? The possibility made me feel sick. How close had I come to being manipulated by him? I don't believe in coincidences, Elijah said, grabbing his jacket. Can you stay with Sophie? Of course. He hesitated at the door. Clara, be careful. If this is connected to Walker somehow, we'll be fine, I assured him. Go. With one last unreadable look, he was gone. I locked the door behind him, then checked on Sophie, who had fallen back asleep surrounded by her stars. As I watched her peaceful face, I realized just how much this little family had come to mean to me, and how close I'd come to unknowingly putting them in Austin Walker's crosshairs. The security breach, as it turned out, was indeed connected to Austin Walker, but not in the way either of us had expected. Elijah returned at dawn, exhausted but with a grim satisfaction on his face. I was in the kitchen making coffee, having barely slept myself. "Walker's been arrested," he announced without preamble. "Corporate espionage, attempted theft of intellectual property, and blackmail." I nearly dropped the mug I was holding. "What?" "He's been targeting my company for years, but we finally caught him. And do you know what the most interesting part was?" Elijah accepted the coffee I handed him. "He had files on several of my employees, including you." A chill ran through me. "Me? Why?" "Because you have access to my home." Elijah's eyes darkened. "He researched everyone in my inner circle, looking for vulnerabilities. Your sister's medical condition made you a perfect target." I sank into a chair, feeling slightly ill. He knew about Emma all along. The coffee shop near Sophie's school? "Wasn't a coincidence," Elijah confirmed. "None of it was." "I'm such an idiot," I whispered. "No." Elijah's hand covered mine on the table, warm and reassuring. "You're someone who is trying to help her sister while being manipulated by a master." I looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "I could have compromised your company, your home. But you didn't." His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand. "Because you're loyal, Clara. Even when I accused you and threatened to fire you, your first concern was for Sophie." The gesture was soothing, intimate in a way that made my heart race. "She's easy to love." "And her father?" The question was soft, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard from him before. Our eyes met, and 6 months of dancing around each other, of professional distance maintained despite growing attraction, suddenly seemed ridiculous. "Her father is complicated," I answered honestly. "Demanding, protective to a fault, stubborn." I took a deep breath. "And impossible not to fall for, despite my best efforts." His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected such directness. "I promised myself I wouldn't cross this line," he admitted. "You're Sophie's nanny. There are power dynamics to consider." I nodded, appreciating his awareness. "There are. But I'm also a woman who knows her own mind, Elijah. I've never been intimidated by you, impressed, yes, but not intimidated." A smile touched his lips. "I noticed. It's one of the things I admire most about you." "Just one of the things?" I couldn't help teasing. Instead of answering, he brought my hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to my knuckles. The simple gesture sent electricity racing through me. "I meant what I said before," he murmured against my skin. "I don't share what's mine. If we do this, if we explore whatever this is between us, I'm all in, Clara." "I'm not looking for half measures either," I assured him. "But I need to know my job isn't contingent on us. Sophie deserves better than that, and so do I." "Agreed." He released my hand reluctantly. "Which is why, if we do this, you can't be Sophie's nanny anymore." My heart sank. "But she needs you," he finished for me. "But in a different capacity. One where you're not an employee, but an equal partner in this household." The implication of his words took my breath away. That's a lot, Elijah. We haven't even had a proper date." His smile turned wry. "I'm not proposing marriage. Not yet, anyway. But I am suggesting we stop pretending there isn't something significant between us." A small voice interrupted us. "Does this mean Miss Clara is staying forever now?" We both turned to see Sophie standing in the doorway, her pajamas rumpled from sleep, but her eyes alert and hopeful. Elijah and I exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between us. "That's something Miss Clara and I are discussing," Elijah told his daughter carefully. "Well, discuss faster," Sophie said with the impatience only a 7-year-old could muster. "Because I already told my friends at school that she's part of our family." With that declaration, she bounced into the kitchen and began rummaging through the refrigerator as if she hadn't just dropped an emotional bombshell. Elijah looked at me, his expression somewhere between amusement and wonder. It seems my daughter has made her position clear. She usually does, I agreed, unable to suppress my smile. And what about you, Clara? He asked quietly. What's your position? I looked between them, the powerful man who had opened his home and now, potentially, his heart to me, and the remarkable child who had already claimed me as family. My position is right here, I said simply. With both of you. His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, rare and all the more beautiful for it. Good, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face with tender fingers. Because you're ours now, Clara Bennett. And we don't share.